Horror games are designed to scare, but psychological horror goes a step further. Instead of relying on cheap thrills or monsters, they tap into your deepest fears, twisting your mind and perception of reality. These games manipulate emotions while creating unease with every step. In this video, we'll explore the most mind-bending and terrifying psychological horror games you definitely need to play. So, without wasting more time, let's get into the video. Visage is a horror game that takes place in a creepy house filled with dark secrets. You play as Dwayne Anderson, and your mission is to uncover the horrifying stories of the house's former residents. Each chapter dives into a different tale, and trust me, they're not just scary, they're deeply disturbing. Visage doesn't rely on cheap jump scares. It uses sound, lighting, and unpredictability to keep you on edge the entire time. The game has a sanity system that makes things even scarier. Your sanity drops if you stay in the dark too long or see something supernatural. And when that happens, the ghosts in the house become more dangerous. You'll have to stay in the light and keep your cool to survive. There are also a lot of puzzles in Visage that make things even more intense. You'll need to search every corner of the house, pick up clues, and figure out how to move forward. But don't expect the game to tell you what to do. It's all on you to piece everything together. So, if you want a horror game that'll mess with your head and leave you seriously creeped out, Visage is a must-play. It's a slow burn, tense experience that will keep you thinking about it long after you finish. When it came out in 2017, it completely changed the Resident Evil formula, shifting the third-person perspective to a first-person perspective that pulls you right into the terrifying experience. You're playing as Ethan Winters, who's looking for his missing wife, Mia. Her last message leads him to an old creepy house where the Baker family lives, but what starts as a search for answers quickly turns into a nightmare. The Baker family, with their twisted personalities, are genuinely terrifying. They're not monsters, they're real people who've been twisted by something dark and evil. And that's what makes them so terrifying. They don't just want to scare you. They'll do whatever it takes to keep you trapped in their twisted world. They'll mess with your mind, and believe me, they do it well. And also, this is a survival game, so you really have to think on your feet. Ammo is super limited, and you can't just shoot your way out of everything. Sometimes you gotta sneak around, solve puzzles, and make sure you have enough resources to survive the next horrifying encounter. The house itself is like another character in the game. It's like a maze that keeps shifting. There are dark, claustrophobic hallways that'll make you feel trapped, and the lighting and sounds mess with your head. It's not just scary, it's psychologically terrifying. Fran Bow is a game that's not just scary, it's deeply unsettling and emotional. The story follows a young girl named Fran who goes through something no one should ever experience. She witnesses the brutal murder of her parents and ends up in a mental asylum. From there, she begins her journey. The game is all about her trying to figure out what happened and cope with everything she's been through. You switch between two worlds, the real world where things seem normal at first, and a nightmarish version of the world that is much more disturbing. Each world has different clues and puzzles you'll need to solve to get to the truth. The art style is hand-drawn, and it's full of weird, dark imagery that fits perfectly with the creepy vibe of the game. The soundtrack adds to the tension, making you feel like something is always lurking just around the corner. If you're looking for a game that doesn't just scare you, but makes you think, Fran Bow is one you have to try. It's a deep, emotional ride that sticks with you long after you finish it. Soma is one of those games that stays with you long after you've played it. It's a psychological horror game from the team behind Amnesia: The Dark Descent, so you already know you're in for something special. You play as Simon Jarrett, who wakes up in this strange dark station after a terrible car accident. Right from the start, you feel something's wrong. You're alone in this abandoned place, with only the echoes of a broken world around you. As you explore, you start finding notes, recordings, and clues about what happened at the station. They were doing crazy experiments on artificial intelligence and human consciousness. As you play, you'll start to wonder if you even know who you are anymore. What does it mean to be alive? What happens when your consciousness doesn't match your body? These are the things that make Soma stick with you long after you finish playing. The atmosphere is next level. The sound design is incredible. It makes every creak, whisper, and echo feel like a warning. Walking down a hallway feels nerve-wracking. And when you hear something strange, your heart will start racing because you don't know what's coming next. If you're looking for a game that will give you real psychological horror, one that's not just about the jumps or scares, Soma is definitely a must-play. The Evil Within is a seriously creepy horror game made by Shinji Mikami, who is the same genius behind Resident Evil. In this game, you play as Detective Sebastian Castellanos. The story kicks off with him investigating a brutal murder at a mental hospital. But it's not long before everything goes completely off the rails. Suddenly, he's pulled into a twisted nightmare world full of monsters and mind-bending events. And from there, it's a fight to stay alive while you try to figure out what's real and what's not. Every place you visit, from creepy villages to old abandoned mansions, feels like it's alive and watching you. The lighting and sounds in this game are on point. Every time you hear a door creak or a whisper in the dark, you're going to feel like something is lurking just behind you. The gameplay is intense. You'll have to fight off terrifying creatures with limited ammo and supplies. So you've got to be smart about how you move and when you fight. It's not just about blasting everything you see. You'll need to sneak past monsters and always be on your toes. It's one of those games that messes with your head and keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time. In Amnesia: The Dark Descent, you play the role of Daniel, who's lost his memory and finds himself trapped in a creepy, mysterious castle. You don't know who you are or why you're there, and the only thing guiding you is a letter telling you to kill a man named Alexander. As you explore the castle, you quickly realize that the true terror isn't what's in front of you. The fear in this game doesn't come from what you can see, but from what you can't. And believe me, the less you see, the worse it gets. One of the things that makes this game so terrifying is the sound design. You'll hear faint whispers, creaking doors, and all kinds of eerie noises that'll make your skin crawl. Even when you're standing in pitch-black darkness, it feels like something is right there with you. The environment is crafted to make you feel like you're not alone, even when you can't see a single thing in the darkness. And the gameplay isn't all about running from monsters. You'll also have to solve puzzles that make you dig deeper into the story. The narrative unfolds as you explore, but it's never clear who you can trust. The deeper you go, the more you uncover, and the more twisted things become. Detention is a 2D side-scrolling horror game by Red Candle Games, and it's set in 1960s Taiwan during a time known as the White Terror, which is a period of intense political oppression and fear. You start the game as two students named Wei and Ray who find themselves trapped in their school after a typhoon warning. At first, it seems like a simple case of bad weather, but things quickly spiral into something much darker. The school transforms into this terrifying, twisted version of itself, filled with disturbing secrets and creepy supernatural creatures. The creatures you encounter, called the Lingered, are straight out of Taiwanese folklore. They're creepy, but what's even scarier is how the game forces you to face them. And also, these aren't average jump scare type monsters. They're terrifying because they represent something deeper and connected to the story and the fears of that time. The visuals are stunning in the creepiest way possible. The hand-drawn art is beautiful, but also incredibly disturbing. Also, the sound design is top-notch. Every little creak or whisper keeps you on edge. The scares aren't cheap. They're the kind that sticks with you long after you've turned off the game. In Sound Mind is a horror game developed by We Create Stuff and released in 2021. But it's definitely not your typical jump scare kind of game. In the game, you play as Desmond Wales, who is a psychologist, and wake up in this creepy broken-down building that screams something is wrong. As you explore, you find audio tapes belonging to Desmond's past patients. These tapes aren't just recordings, they are portals into the minds of his patients, creating terrifying, surreal worlds that reflect their deepest fears and traumas. Each patient's story introduces unique gameplay mechanics. For instance, one world might have you using light to fight off a shadowy monster, while another throws in clever puzzles to test your brain. It's like every chapter is its own psychological roller coaster. What makes In Sound Mind so terrifying isn't just the monsters or jump scares. It's the way it messes with your head. You're not just playing through creepy levels, you're diving into Desmond's mind, which gets more twisted the deeper you go. The world around you starts to change, and you'll constantly question what's real. Little Nightmares, developed by the indie team Tarsier Studios in 2017, became a horror standout in the horror genre. In the game, you play as Six, who is a tiny girl trapped in a massive ship known as the Maw. The Maw is a dark, weird place filled with these gigantic, grotesque creatures. The thing is, you're small and vulnerable without any sword or powers. You can't fight back, so you're always running, hiding, or trying to figure out how to escape. The monsters are kind of human, but not really. Those are huge, faceless things that look like they came straight out of a nightmare. The game's environments are designed to feel like a twisted version of things children might be afraid of, with a constant sense of unease. The gameplay focuses on stealth and puzzle solving rather than combat, while forcing you to avoid enemies that are much larger and more powerful than you. There's a constant feeling of being hunted, with the terrifying enemies always lurking just out of sight. As you progress, you'll uncover more about the strange world you're trapped in. And honestly, the more you learn, the more disturbing it gets. Little Nightmares sticks with you long after you finish, leaving you thinking about it, even when you're not playing. Layers of Fear is a psychological horror game that plunges players into a mind-bending journey through the psyche of a tormented artist. In this game, you play as a painter who's struggling to finish his masterpiece. But as you explore his home, things get really weird and creepy. As you go through the mansion, you uncover secrets about his life, his guilt, and his obsession with making the perfect painting. But the more you learn, the more twisted everything becomes. The game messes with your mind, making you wonder if what you're seeing is real or just in the artist's head. What makes Layers of Fear so scary is the atmosphere. It's not only about jump scares, it's about the constant feeling that something's not right. The mansion itself seems alive while changing its layout and playing tricks on you. Every time you think you've figured out what's going on, something else happens to make you second-guess everything. And that's why Layers of Fear is so good. It doesn't rely on the usual horror game tricks. It's all about messing with your head. And that's why it's one of the scariest psychological horror games you can play. Silent Hill 2, which was released in 2024, is a remake of the iconic 2001 horror game Konami originally developed. The remake stays true to the original story and psychological horror elements, while introducing modern visuals and gameplay updates. The game is developed by Bloober Team, which is the studio behind games like Layers of Fear and The Medium, with the full support of Konami, and also built using Unreal Engine 5. You play as an ordinary man named James Sunderland, who's summoned to the mysterious town of Silent Hill by a letter from his wife Mary. But Mary has been dead for 3 years. James is desperate to find her, but as he explores the town, he discovers that Silent Hill is far more than just an ordinary town. The game masterfully blends psychological horror with supernatural elements, but the real terror comes from confronting the emotional and psychological horrors that haunt James. James isn't a hardened action hero like Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil. He's an ordinary guy trying to make sense of his guilt and loss. That's what makes the psychological horror hit so much harder. You aren't just battling monsters, you're battling the consequences of your own mind. And trust me, this game makes you feel every ounce of that tension. And that's a wrap on our list of psychological horror games you definitely need to play. These games will keep you on the edge of your seat, challenging your mind and pushing your fears to the limit. Let us know in the comments which game creeped you out the most, or if there's a title you think should have made the list. If you want to stay with us, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon for more thrilling content. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.